This right here is one of the most unique parts of any train line in the United States. With thousands of train lines in the country, only 2 have it and only a few globally have it. The majority concentrated in southern England. Yet, of the thousands of people who ride daily, barely anyone notices it, despite it being very obviously noticeable when you know what to look for. Right here is one of the more unique tunnels in the entire world due to how old it is, and here's a station that may no longer exist in a few years, despite the fact that engineers want to extend the line past this station. But what is all of this and why are we here? Well, this is the MBTA Blue Line, and today we're going to ride the entire length of the line to show you what the history is, why the line came to be this way, just how it is so unique, and what the past and future hold for this line. So come with me to Bowdoin Station, and I'm going to show you this side of the line. Good morning, my name is Evelyn and welcome to Bowdoin Station. This is a consistent least favorite station of both riders and the MBTA alike. It has an incredibly weird design resulting in oddities on the trains themselves that no other station has to accommodate for. It also is one of the only non-accessible stations on the entire network and the only non-accessible station on this entire line. And for those reasons and more, people want to close this station down. Getting through the gates is very easy once you are down here, as all it requires is a card or a Charlie card. I did not want to buy a Charlie card on this ride as the train was coming very soon, or at least the headway said so I simply used a debit card to get through. Once through, we can go down and see the first oddity at this station, and that is just the shape of it. See, Bowdoin is a terminus station, meaning that is the final station on the line before it ends. Yet, the engineers did not build this big enough way back in the day when they built it, so when these new cars were made, they had to make it so that 2 of the cars would go a little bit deep into the tunnel before the train would start up. And for that reason, these buttons exist right here. They exist to command the opening of any car door that you want from the outside of the door, as no setting was programmed in that would allow all of them except for those 2 car doors to be opened. This station is very problematic for more reasons that we will get to later. For now, let's go on our train as we dash down to Government Center. Government Center is extremely close to Bowdoin. In fact, it is so close that you can walk between them in a very short time and even bike between them in less than a minute. It's something I've done before. That is one of the reasons for Bowdoin's redundancy. Government Center is one of the more unique stations of the MBTA due to it being a transfer station. It is also one of the most iconic stations of the MBTA, as it has this outside, which is now visible actually on some MBTA Charlie cards, I believe. This outside is absolutely beautiful at night, as it often lights up green and blue for both of the lines. However, on special occasions, such as when the Bruins are in the playoffs, they may change the colors to make it more aligned with the vibe of the city for that night. Now, we're going to move past Government Center fairly quickly and on to State. Another one that is also in a walking distance of the first 2. This one with the purpose of letting one connect to the Orange Line. State is also built into a very old State House, although it is only part of the State House that is used for it. The rest of it is still used for other things, but it is very cool to be able to walk through a piece of history on your daily commute if you use this station daily. Now, once we're past State, we're going to move on to our final station in the Shawmut Peninsula, and that is Aquarium. Aquarium is cool because it actually has some theming with water dripping out of it at times. However, the reason for that is something we'll get to later. For now, let's see what's right here, and that is the New England Aquarium. While Aquarium is great due to the amount of things here, not only the aquarium, but also the park spa here and this really cool looking hotel, we have other places to be. So we are going to go under the East Boston Tunnel, or what is now known as the Blue Line Tunnel, to get to the next part of the city, and that is East Boston. However, under here, let's talk about something really cool, and that is the fact that this is the first ever underwater rapid transit tunnel built in the entire continent of America. Yes, that is completely true. Before the Transbay Tube came this thing. With it being so old, there are often issues with leakage as it was built way more than 100 years ago. In fact, more than 120 years ago. However, the engineering is extremely impressive for the time. This tunnel is also incredibly tight, which has led to some other problems for the line. But those are ones we'll talk about as we get further down the line. For now, we are arriving into Maverick, which is situated right in East Boston. East Boston is a mostly residential part of Boston. There's not really that much to see if you are a tourist, with the exception of this beautiful view right here. And this view is one of the most iconic views of Boston, and I believe it is just a 10-minute walk away from Maverick Station. Soon though, we are moving on to Airport, and while you may think that Airport is just a normal, run-of-the-mill airport station, it is truly not. In fact, it is one of the most unique airport stations in the entire country, and while it has a beautiful place to get photos and videos of trains from, there's also something else we need to see when we walk out of the train. So come with me out of the train for a bit to see just what this thing is, and in fact, see just what this oddity is that only exists on 2 train lines in the entirety of the US. This right here is the power switcher. And at this point in the train ride, the train will switch from third rail electricity to an overhead catenary wire. But why is this? Why not just use one of them? Well, the problem is that in the city, the tunnels were built so long ago with such old rolling stock that these third rails were sufficient for it, and no one had to consider using an overhead catenary wire. However, once you get further from the city, you are closer to the water, and you are also outside. And the problem with that is it causes the third rails to freeze up in the winter and often become unusable or dangerous. So, to alleviate this, but still allow the train to work on both sides of it, the MBTA decided to add some overhead catenary wires. And that is the reason for this station being a switcher. In previous days, the train would actually turn off in the middle. However, nowadays, the trains are equipped with batteries that keep them on for the short time, as to not leave passengers who may just be getting in from a flight or who may not use the train that often all too confused or worried. And as you can see here, there are signs that tell drivers when to activate the third rail fins and when to activate the overhead wire fins, which require a bit of time to go up. This station is also unique in terms of airport stations in the fact that it actually does not directly connect to the airport. Rather, one must take a bus from here. So for that reason, many prefer to use the Silver Line, which brings them directly to any of the major terminals in the airport. Now, while some other trains in the world have it, it is very unique by US standards, and like I said, not too many other trains in the world have it. The best example is South London commuter trains, which go from London to southern cities like Brighton and Plymouth. However, these are just a few commuter lines. The other main line in the US that has it is the New York City Metro North line that goes to New Haven. So that makes this a very unique feature, and while this is just an alleviation to the problem, it is actually very cool to see how it was fit in. But now we are already moving on to and through Wood Island. Wood Island does not have that much that is terribly interesting. It is mostly a bus terminal for commuter buses, or a stop to get out at and walk to your home from. As we are not commuters though, this is not incredibly interesting to us. So we're going to go past Wood Island and through the beautiful Constitution Beach Park. The Blue Line gives absolutely beautiful views of the airplanes that you can see flying above it, and it also brings you to beautiful beaches such as this one and Revere Beach. It is one of the more beautiful lines of the MBTA for that reason, although I don't know if I'd say it is the most beautiful one. For that one, you might have to look at another line. But soon we are into Orient Heights. Here is where the Blue Line's trains are stored at night and when they're doing maintenance on them. Other than that, there is not terribly much here. However, it is really cool to watch the trains come in and out if you are a rail fan. Past this, we come to the least used station on the entire Blue Line, one that we will see in a few weeks. Here is Suffolk Downs. Suffolk Downs has a very complicated history, and one that would take an entire video on its own to explain. But to sum it up lightly, it used to be a horse and dog racing downs until that was prohibited in Massachusetts. Nowadays, there has been proposals to put up apartments there, or to make it be a nice park, or to make it a concert venue. Ultimately now, it is a concert venue, and one is able to see artists such as Boy Genius or Pulp at this venue. However, it is interesting to look into the history of it. And this history is also why Wonderland is named that way too, one that you might not know if you do not actually live in Revere. One of the issues from earlier that I did not resolve is why Bowdoin is so disliked, and that is because it is inaccessible. Another big reason is for the proximity to Charles MGH. See, the Blue Line and the Red Line are the only two MBTA lines that are not connected. So the proposal is to extend the Blue Line to Charles MGH and close down Bowdoin, as Bowdoin would take too long to make accessible to ADA standards. And keep in mind that if it is remodeled, it must be made accessible, or it cannot be remodeled. So, because of that, it is ultimately just better to extend it under the street. But let's go back to where we are now. And right now, we are arriving into Beachmont. Beachfront is one of my favorite stations on the system. I've never actually lived around here, however, I do just love and adore the design on here, and it is one that only exists on Beachmont and Revere Beach. Other than that, there's not too much here, so we move on to Revere Beach. Revere Beach is a station I've used many times, usually once or twice a year, to access the beautiful beach by here. One of the great things about living in Boston is that one can simply take the train to the beach but still have an experience of living in a huge city. And that is something that a lot of people value. For that reason, this stop gets used a lot during the summer. If you are also an av geek, which I know a lot of rail fans are too, it is amazing for viewing planes overhead, and you can go on flight radar and see where they're coming from. But moving past Revere Beach, we're not incredibly far at all from Wonderland, so let's take a look at our train. Right now, the Blue Line is on its 700 series. These are built by Siemens, and there are 94 of them currently in service. Now, these are designed specifically for the switch between third rail and overhead wire. They're not too old, but they're not too new either. However, they did replace the Hawker Siddeley 600 series. The only really similar train that you will find to this is that of the Tren Urbano in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And that train is one definitely for another video, but is very interesting in its own right. Let's see what exactly is inside, and as you can see on the side, there are often a lot of ads here. The seats are not the most ergonomic in the world, and they're very hard plastic. However, no journey on this ride will typically last more than around 20 minutes, even if riding from start to end. Above, there's screens that show the name of the next stop that the train is arriving into. On the side, there are these maps right here of the Blue Line alone, and there are also some maps of the entire system. And the windows are actually very clear compared to a lot of the other lines on the MBTA. But now we are already arriving into Wonderland, the final stop of our journey. Although, your journey does not have to end here, as there are so many wacky trains in Massachusetts. In fact, one of the only videos that I decided to let you guys watch from before I privated my old videos is about one of those trains, specifically the Cape Flyer. To watch this video, click here, or if you want to see more about different metros in Boston, click here to watch my video about the Red Line. Regardless, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.